Hello Internet. Today we're talking about cell membranes and the things that make them up. The main ingredient in a cell membrane is something called a phospholipid, and we're going to talk for a few minutes about what that is. First, I've got a couple more definitions I want to go through, starting really small. High school science class. An atom is the smallest piece of something that's still itself, like oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon. Those are words you hear in sci-fi movies. Basically, they're elements, and if you chop that element into tiny pieces until there's nothing left but like electrons and protons and tiny things, the last piece of that oxygen that you can still call oxygen is an atom. It's got a nucleus and electrons spinning around it, and I should have a graphic for that, but I don't. And then if you zoom out a little bit and look at something slightly bigger, that's a group of different kinds of atoms possibly mixed together, connected to each other, you get a molecule. Water is a molecule. And we'll talk a little bit more about water in a second. See, I'm letting you know what's about to happen so you get really excited about it and keep watching. Cell. A cell is a bubble of life. I talked about them a little bit in a past video. A cell is a small piece of tissue. Everything that's alive has cells in it, and it's basically made of cells. Three-dimensionally, I like to think of them as water balloons with stuff inside mixed in with the water. And the cell membrane is what I am focusing on in these videos. It's the skin of the cell, made of phospholipids and with lots of other stuff embedded in the skin, in the membrane, and clumped outside it and inside it too. So to talk more about the water that I brought up, there are so many different ways of thinking about water. Obviously it's wet and you can see it. You zoom in a little bit and you find out what's in it, and it's two hydrogen atoms stuck to an oxygen atom using chemistry. And chemistry is really mathematical. It's about energy and electricity and numbers and all sorts of stuff that I'm not going to talk about at all, if possible. So I wanted to talk about water just to show that there are different ways of representing the same idea. Water, you've probably come across the term H2O, which is the atomic representation of the molecule. It means each molecule of water, each piece of water, has two hydrogens and one oxygen atom in it, and the atoms are the tiny pieces of things. So if you look in the middle, that's often how water is represented in a chemistry textbook. It's one oxygen and two hydrogen atoms, and the letters are used for each atom, and there are lines in between to show how they're connected. Now, if you look at this, that's more like how they actually are, because we think of atoms as balls, as spheres. And hydrogen is smaller than oxygen, so it kind of sticks on to the sides like that. And I wanted to show this just as a simple example of something we'll be going into later about molecules, because the molecules involved in cells and cell membranes, instead of 3 atoms, they can have hundreds and thousands of atoms. It's insane. So instead of using this kind of, oh, that didn't work, this kind of thing, we'll be using this kind of thing. I think you get the same idea, and it's a lot more fun, and I get to use my markers. So a phospholipid is an amphiphilic molecule structurally consisting of 2 hydrophobic fatty acid tails and a hydrophilic head joined together by a glycerol molecule. I don't know why I even bothered making this. Can I call it a slide? It's an index card with writing on it, because I'm low tech. If you haven't noticed yet, yeah. So amphiphilic means, from another episode, and I threw my slides on the floor, it means that part of it likes water and part of it hates water. So part of it will want to dissolve in the water and part of it will want to stick out if it's put in water. It has 2 legs or tails on the molecule. If you think of it as like a little person with no torso and just legs, like a head and legs, The head part likes water, and the tail, the two legs, hate water. And there's a sugar molecule in there too, or glycerol, sorry. So this is a phospholipid. This is a much easier way to think about phospholipids and to define them. Part of it is a big clumpy molecule, and we draw it as a circle, and textbooks do it too, so I kind of thought that would be a good way to start out. And they like to party. They like to dissolve in things and interact with other molecules, water, swishing around, everything's good. The legs are really, really shy and only like to hang out with other legs. They clump together so they don't have to talk to anybody else. And they don't really talk to each other that much either. They're not very, very friendly. So a bilayer is the next step in our conversation. A bilayer is a double layer of closely packed molecules. An easier way to think of that: two layers stacked on top of each other. Think a sandwich with nothing inside, just two pieces of bread laying on top of each other. So it's like this. That's the picture we had before of these guys, only I colored them in and drew them the way they are. The legs all stick together. If you have enough of them, they make a bilayer. So the heads are all out there dissolved in the water, and the legs are all protected from the water because they're so shy. If you have a few of them, they clump up together in a circle like this. But in nature, we mostly find bilayers. And this is what a cell membrane looks like if you just keep going with that. And so this is the way I'm going to be representing phospholipids for this course. This video is getting really long. Let me see how I can shorten it up. The one other thing I wanted to describe was to show the difference. We were talking about molecular structure and water and how atoms and molecules are represented in a picture form. This is a phospholipid on this side, and you can see at the top there's the letter P with a bunch of O's around it. That's the phosphate part. In the middle there's a bunch of CH's, those are carbons and hydrogens. And down below there are two legs of carbon and hydrogen with a little oxygen in there. Those are the fatty acid tails. We're probably never going to talk about that again, which is why I made this drawing. And this drawing. This drawing. This is what they do in nature. There are tons of these little guys because each cell in your body is made up of phospholipid bilayers. And cells are so small you can't see them, and your body is big enough that you can see it. So, there's no need to do math here because numbers don't mean that much when they get that big or that small. If you cut a cell in half and looked at it in a cross-section, the same way you'd cut an orange in half and look at it, the skin of the orange would look like this. When actually, in a three-dimensional structure, it's more like see, another place I could be using fancy editing and jump cuts and narrating over stop motion picture animation, and instead you get to see the arm of my pajamas because just going to leave that as a ... because you fill in the blank in comments and I'll love you for it. So that's the end. Phospholipids look like this. They've got a part that's roundish at the top or the bottom that dissolves in the water that's outside a cell or inside a cell. And in the middle of the two phospholipid molecules that kind of pair up, top and bottom, upside down and up, right side up, are the phospholipid tails, which are the fatty parts that don't like to dissolve in water. And there are two of them per molecule. They're very pretty. And that's it for now.